A spoiler alert. Part of this sermon is a story which some of you have already heard. Some of you heard me tell this in an Eli talk, a Jewish TED talk, basically, that was released just before Rosh Hashanah. But do me a favor, stay with me. Don't go to sleep. This is different. 3 years ago, I stood on the beach in Evanston. I'm often at the beach to swim, but that day in June, I was there for another purpose. You see, I had marked my civil divorce at the Daily Center a few days earlier. As the court date had approached, I was resolute. I needed a Jewish way to mark the end of my marriage as well. No, not simply because I'm a rabbi. I began my marriage, as did, I'm sure, many of you, standing under a chuppah. I needed to end my marriage in a Jewish way, too. I needed meaning and a connection to our tradition. But what? I really didn't know what to do, which caught me off guard. For all my ability, my experience, and reflection with ritual, I've created thoughtful ritual over the years for entering motherhood, alternative yisker, adult b'nai mitzvah, welcoming children of both genders, boys and girls, into the covenant equally. This one, I couldn't figure out. So I set out to figure it out. I researched, I read, I called friends and colleagues across the globe and across the Jewish spectrum. One day then, I called my friend Andrea, a brilliant professor and a generally wise woman, and she said, "Lisa, you'll know. You'll know what you need to do." Seriously? I hadn't known much the past year. I was off my game for sure. I had gone day to day with the range of emotions, trying to live, parent, and work the best I could. So what did I know? I knew that even though I had gotten a get, a Jewish writ of divorce, I needed more to mark this transition. I needed meaning that touched my soul and was grounded in Jewish tradition. I needed people who supported me and understood my journey to surround and support me that day. And, well, I needed water. I'm happiest in water for sure, but water is a vehicle for transformation within Judaism. And so I found myself at Lighthouse Beach that day 3 years ago, at the end of June. I stood at the water's edge in my bathing suit, and I approached the lake, which was that day my mikveh, my transformative body of water. 3 friends surrounded me, and I sang. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. The soul you have given me, God, is a pure one. These words from the morning liturgy speak to the new start that each of us is able to make each morning, each day. I entered the lake and immersed 3 times. Then I walked out of the lake, approached my friends on the beach. We sang. They shared words of strength and blessing. And I realized that my wise friend Andrea was right. I knew. In the months following, I wrote about the experience of seeking meaningful Jewish ritual where there was a gap and an opportunity. Many of you read that essay. It was called "What Do You Wear to Get Divorced?" It was posted, started with a question, what should I wear? Posted it in the Huffington Post, and to my surprise, large numbers of people read it and shared the post. It said it touched them, meant something, gave them words where they didn't have them. Got me thinking. If I, a rabbi who am inclined toward Jewish ritual, couldn't wrap my head around this time in my life, And if existing Jewish tradition didn't meet my needs, how many other people didn't even know that they could turn to Judaism for moments in their lives where we didn't have something to mark them? I realized that the potential for guiding others, for teaching, was huge. This is why I share this story with you tonight, on the most sacred day of our Jewish year. Yom Kippur is a day on which we reflect on our choices and decisions. We think about what matters in our lives, what has meaning, and what it means, in the words of tomorrow's Torah portion, to choose life. Yom Kippur is a day full of meaning and ritual. On most days, actually, we humans seek meaning, but not quite at the level of Yom Kippur. This is a Jewish thing, but not just a Jewish thing. Inherently, we look to make connections and elevate moments in our lives. We humans are makers of ritual, too. We seek order and control in a world that guarantees neither. And we tend to seek connection to people and anchors that ground us amidst chaos and loneliness in our world. We do it all the time. Think about your life. Think about rituals, putting children to bed with stories and song, recalling late parents and grandparents, particular moments, celebrating birthdays year after year in the exact same way. How about throwing toast or marshmallows at college football games? Or talking about family history, about the immigrants in your family when you go to vote? Just a few weeks ago, I stood with my kids at Wrigley Field singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" at the 7th inning stretch. Tell me that's not ritual? Dan and Chip Heath, business school professors at Duke and Stanford, and brothers, in their book, The Power of Moments, describe something they call defining moments. It's not ritual per se, but I found that their description informs our exploration of ritual. They write, "We all have defining moments in our lives, meaningful experiences that stand out in our memory. Defining moments shape our lives, but we don't have to wait for them to happen. We can be the authors of them." Indeed, they say every culture has its prescribed set of big moments that seem natural to us. But if we go back and look at the moments of those cultures, including our own, we notice that each and every one of them was invented by authors who wanted to shape time, to give shape to time. The Heath brothers, which is how they call themselves on their website, encourage us to think in moments, to recognize where the prose of life needs punctuation. Because, they say, and they've researched, when we look back at our lives and we assess our experiences, we tend to remember the flagship moments, the peaks, the pits, and the transitions. When we attune ourselves to those moments, we break the script and create more moments of elevation in our lives. What these Heath brothers, what these professors describe is actually the enterprise of Jewish life across our history. That's what we Jews do. We mark peaks, pitfalls, and transitions, and we author defining moments all the time. We do it through ritual. Ritual is a repeated event that provides structure and meaning in our lives, that links people across time and space. And ritual carries us through the changes of our lives, guiding us to remember to make time and recognize time, and to be sustained through life's great joys and sorrows and all those really hard to categorize moments in between. Ritual is how Jews think in moments, to use the Professor Heath term. It is how we make our moments defining or meaningful moments. As Rabbi and theologian Arthur Greene explains, Jewish life is centered on two great cycles and the intersections between them. The eternally repeating cycle of the week, the month, and the year, laden with sacred days and mitzvot, that is, our holidays. And as he describes, the inexorable march of each individual human life from birth to death, what we often call the life cycle, also marked in sacred ways. That's what we Jews do, right? We mark the occasions of our lives and the occasions of our year. Yet, as professor and ritual expert Vanessa Ox explains, not everything is represented in those two cycles. Countless moments do not have Jewish ritual for them. And history has shown us that over time, we've actually filled in some of those blanks with new ritual. Among them, bar mitzvah. It was once new. Confirmation, naming of a baby girl, and so much more. And we see, too, that holiday and life cycle ritual is not static or unchanging. Bar mitzvah wasn't created at Sinai. It's changed over the years, and depending where you go, it's still very different. The Jewish wedding ritual has changed over time. The Passover, Seder, and celebration of Shabbat have certainly changed over time and miles. In fact, as the distinguished Reform Rabbi Solomon Friedhoff wrote many decades ago, many of the best beloved and most universally observed of Jewish ceremonial life can't even be traced their origins. He writes, this is true of the mourner's Kaddish, Yartzeit, bar mitzvah, the chuppah at weddings, and even Yizkor. Think about that. Even the proverbial sacred cows of our Jewish lives, the ritual we hold dear that anchors us, they were newcomers at one point, and they've changed over time. In our lives today, we mark occasions with Jewish practice, age-old and changing. But now we can do something else. We can see the gaps in those cycles as places to innovate. Perhaps you felt a gap at a moment in your life. You might not have named it a Jewish gap. Perhaps you felt a time that was empty, or you felt ungrounded, a moment you needed connection, or an occasion you sought to lift up, to elevate. Maybe it was a joyous time, choosing a Hebrew name as an adult, graduating from college or graduate school, learning to drive, watching a child learn to drive, moving forward after illness, marking an act of social justice with your parent or child, buying your first home, or taking a momentous trip. Maybe you experienced a gap at a time of challenge or loss, remembering a deceased parent on their birthday, closing up your childhood home, wrestling with addiction, marking the change in family roles as adult children take on parent-like roles to aging parents, building something that honors a loved one, or anticipating the death of someone you hold dear. Or perhaps the gap occurred at an event that had some Jewish thing to mark it, but it wasn't enough. That's what happened to me. There is a Jewish marker for divorce, getting a get, a writ of divorce, but it wasn't enough. For others, it might be or have been a lack of women's names and voices in the Passover Seder. I would imagine if I asked people to raise their hands right now, countless among us here would say they've added a Miriam's cup or an orange on their Seder plate to change that gap. In 1922, a rabbi named Mordecai Kaplan created what we now call bat mitzvah. It didn't exist. There was only bar mitzvah. And in recent decades, we've certainly and proudly broadened our definition of a Jewish wedding to mark gay and lesbian weddings and to mark interfaith marriages. Those too fill in gaps. And how about adult B'nai Mitzvah, an incredible ritual here at NSCI? That allows adults who either weren't called to the Torah as children or were, but it didn't mean so much then, to be called to the Torah as adults. All of these rituals have filled in gaps and have been created. Judaism invites us to mark time with ritual and to make time sacred. Here's the secret. We can all do it. It's not just the domain of rabbis and cantors and Jewish teachers. But the truth is that not many of us, at least in liberal Judaism and Reform Judaism included, not so many of us feel knowledgeable or confident enough to do it. So we tend to stick by the book, see what's there. So this is my public service announcement for this Kol Nidre, this Erev Yom Kippur. Make Jewish ritual. You already make ritual. Make it Jewish. Do it for a Jewish event or an event with no Jewish connection, like that one when someone learns to drive or you watch a child learn to drive. I'm giving you permission to feel ridiculous, to make mistakes, but most importantly, to attune yourself to the moments in your lives, the peaks, the pits, and the transitions. Break the script and mark those moments in your own way. It's okay to feel uncomfortable, and you know what? You can't do it wrong. You're inventing it. Because here's the thing, Jewish ritual does not have to be old and familiar to be authentic. The marking of sacred time is ever-changing, as are our lives. So here's how. 4 steps. First, ask yourself, where is there a place in my life to mark a moment? A peak, a pit, a transition. Where is there a space that needs marking? You might not know this right away, but keep an open mind. Second, after you have a thought on this, gather your people. Who can sit with you over a good cup of coffee, a glass of wine, or a really good piece of cake, my favorite? Who can sit with you and reflect on what you're thinking? Here's the thing. We, your rabbis and cantor, are happy to reflect with you, but there are an incredible number of people in your lives who have even better ideas than us. Think about what you want to do and how you might do it. Then find the Jewish objects, actions, or words that are important to you, that give you meaning. They might give you structure in your new ritual. Do you love the Shema? Is there a tzedakah bucket in your house that came over through Ellis Island with your great-great-grandfather? Do you need a new mezuzah on a door in your house? Do you love apples and honey or honey cake? The list goes on. Maybe even going to the mikveh or the lake. And then do what feels right for you. You might gather friends, walk in the botanic gardens, and say Shehechianu, grateful to be there, be alive and be enjoying the beauty. You might, on a trip, stop and give tzedakah in a building that was once Jewish in Poland and Spain and who knows where. Or if you're sitting in a hospital room with a friend or loved one, stop and say Shema. Sing Shema with them, or so they can hear it. Bake with your great-grandmother's rolling pin and stop and make up your own blessing. Baruch atah Adonai. Thank you, God, for letting me repeat this tradition. Freak everyone out at your Thanksgiving table. Stop and say a prayer. You could even just do hamotzi. Whatever it is, just do it. Mark the unmarked moment. Author ritual where there isn't. If we don't have it, make it happen. When I went to the lake that day 3 years ago, I thought I was marking an end. I realized long after that I was affirming a new beginning. That's the funny thing about ritual. We may go in and get what we thought, and we might find something even more powerful. Tonight and tomorrow, we open our souls before God. We reflect on where we've been and what we've done. And tomorrow we'll hear the most powerful words of Torah that say, choose life and blessing. What does it mean to choose life and blessing? To mark the moments of our lives with meaning. As we ask God to inscribe us in the book of life this Yom Kippur, let us join God in being authors. Let us be authors writing new scripts to elevate the moments of our lives. Ken Yehi Ratzon. Shana